another Dark Oak Press. It's all about writing seminar. Tonight's topic is writing a series and keeping it fresh. If you've been to our panels before, you know who we are, but there are several new faces in here, so I'm gonna let everybody introduce themselves. We'll let this is the what would I call you again? The luminary of magnificent malice. So mischief malice.
Yeah, my name is Alan Gilbert. I am actually the head of Dark Oak Press. I'm the editor-in-chief. I'm also the host of iHeartMedia's Geek Tank Radio. So you probably get stuck listening to me on the radio all the time, bless your hearts. Hey.
I'm Pat Sawtell. I'm the author of the Shallow's Princess series, which is a cozy paranormal series. I've been writing, I wrote a series in 5.5 years, a 15-novel series, but the first one was published in November 2016. The second one is close to being out.
Yep.
I'm really excited.
I'm Christy Bradley. Write mystical series. This is my first. The second is right behind Patty's, I believe, to be released. And I'm also president of Malice and Memphis Mystery Writers Group, and we publish anthologies. This is our third about historical Elmwood Cemetery here in Memphis. And our fourth is about to be released, and it's entitled Memphis in Mayhem, and it's based on the activities around Memphis in May.
So welcome everybody. We're very informal, so if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. We'd love to. We're going to get started, and the biggest thing I'd say about writing a series and challenges of writing it is keeping up. So when you first start writing a series, sometimes you don't know you're writing a series, you're just writing a story or a book, and it kind of just keeps going. Sometimes you get to that 100,000 word mark and you hadn't stopped. You get to the 200,000 word mark, you need to stop. You need to go back and figure out how to break the first 100,000 into 2 books. But as you go along, you start to introduce new characters and new places, and then you start to develop those characters. As you do that, it's important to keep up with that. It's important to know what traits you've given them, what if they're supernatural powers or superheroes, what can they do, what can they not do. And we've talked about this before. If it's a superhero, he still has to have a weakness. Nobody can be perfect, or you'll never get your story going here. But as you keep up with that stuff, it helps you refer back to them. So we're going to talk about some ways to do that tonight. We're going to talk about stringing the books together, how you do some foreshadowing, and how you carry the reader from one book to another. We have some book examples to show you. We're going to talk about what the hats have to do with it. We brought some things to have fun with tonight. So, Christy, why don't you start us? Give us an idea of foreshadowing.
It's just a hint of what's to come. It may be very subtle, and the reader might not catch on to it at the beginning, but as the story goes on, there'll be like a light bulb going off in their head. Oh, that's what that was about. So it may not make sense now, but it's something that will help you move forward later.
One thing I'd say I found when I was writing my series, the very first book even, I had a beta reader reading it. She missed a key foreshadowing mention that was in there. And I said, did you not pick up on this? And she said, no. And so it told me as a writer, I need to go back and strengthen that paragraph where I was doing the foreshadowing, because you want it to be strong enough that your readers don't miss it, but you don't want it to distract from the story. I missed something in the Harry Potter series, and one of my friends pointed out, she goes, oh, those initials were on this and they meant this, and I'd completely missed it in the story. So sometimes you will mention something that you want to play on later. Be sure it's strong enough. So actually having other people read it will help you see if it's strong enough. Did they catch it? If they didn't catch it, then you got to go back and kind of work with it again. Alan, what kind of tips would you give?
Well, let's pick on a mystery story. Penultimately, a mystery story is a very simple format. A mystery story is we're going to start with a complicating incident and we're going to wind up with a resolution. Now, in a short story, you've only got about 9,000 words, so you don't have a great deal of space to play with. I tell everybody, write that story backwards, because you know who did it, you know how they did it. At least I hope you do, you're the writer. So the idea now is to work your way backwards and leave the right trail of breadcrumbs, but also throw in your misdirections, because you also have what we like to call a red herring, something that every mystery movie you've ever watched on the Hallmark Network always has the suspect that the police arrest who never did it, right? They're the obvious suspect, but they're not ultimately who committed the crime. So if you're going to foreshadow, a lot of times foreshadowing comes to writers long after they've written. As I like to tell people, if you're going to have a fight scene and you're going to hit the bad guy with a fire extinguisher, well, where did the fire extinguisher come from? Well, it was on the wall. All right, where was it on the wall? Well, you may need to go back 2 or 3 chapters and make sure that your hero notices that there's a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. That way, 3 chapters later, when you need to hit somebody in the head with it, you can go get it. But that way, your reader isn't having to try to keep up with you. You already told them there's an umbrella stand over here, there's a doorway over here, and there's a fire extinguisher next to the doorway. So now when your character grabs the fire extinguisher, you as a writer don't have to spend all this time making them run down the hall, making them get by the umbrella stand, making them get by the door. You did all that already. Now you can just say, Patty ran and grabbed the fire extinguisher and clocked Bob in the head with it. You know, that way you can lay the groundwork for making your scenes easier and sometimes more believable. So you get a lot of the early work done. So foreshadowing can be very, very powerful. If you're writing multiple books, whew, wow. The greatest example of just intricate foreshadowing is probably the Harry Potter series. J.K. Rowling does an amazing job of taking the most insignificant fact in book 1 and turning it into the entire reason that there's a book 3. And insignificant facts in books 1, 2, and 3 are absolutely crucial to the outcome in book number 7. So there's a lot of that, and I think a lot of it is just keeping up with your details. Mm-hmm. Now, the more intricate you get, the better a cheat sheet you had better keep. I'm going to hand off at cheat sheets and go, a lot of times when I'm working, especially on like a mystery short story, I have a whiteboard and I have a cheat sheet of all of my little misdirecting facts or actual facts. Things that you just need to know, because I don't get to sit down, maybe I don't get to write the story all at one time. If I have a convention or something, I may be gone for a week. You come back at the end of the week, and I got to read the story again and catch back up, and where did I leave those keys, and what color was the car? Question for you: does anybody in here, can they tell me what color is the Great Gatsby's eyes? One of the greatest books out there. Everybody knows the Great Gatsby. What color are his eyes?
Brown.
Brown. That's a really good guess. Most of the world is brown. Would you like to know that nobody knows?
I didn't.
He never describes them. And you go, wow, how would you not write a book like that without that most fundamental fact? That fundamental fact has nothing to do with that story. You have no idea what color eyes he has.
I'm trying to think, that's written from first person, isn't it?
First person peripheral, it's a secondary character who's actually telling the story.
Oh.
But he never tells you. So what you can foreshadow or hide or place or describe in a book, it is amazing sometimes the things that you don't have to describe.
Yeah.
Cheat sheet. That's what a cheat sheet's for.
Sometimes you don't want to over-describe. You want to leave them, you need each character to have something that calls them out, but if you over-describe, then you might lose those readers. If you sit there and start to go, okay, well, he's 6'5", he weighed 200 pounds, he wore this clothes and this color eye, that's too much. But if you find, like in a romance or something, it's always like he had chiseled abs, or his eyes were smoky gray and drew you in. It's how you describe that feature that you then carry through your books to help pull into a scene and that type of thing. you can use those piercing eyes to carry you into some scene, you know, like how they felt when they were pierced to the people around them. So it's important to do that stuff. But if you don't keep up with that, then by the time you go book 3, book 4, it's like, wait a minute, what's the one trait or the 2 traits for these key characters that I need to carry through? And don't forget. Because, by the way, don't mention it book 1 and never talk about it again either. It needs to be something that strings them along. And that little bit of, she has a curly hair in my book, and he likes to, every once in a blue moon, it's just, he'll comment or he'll think how that curl lays on her shoulder, or that quirk of her smile. That's it. I mean, it tells you that she's an average looking girl. Otherwise, it doesn't really give you a lot of description. But I use those little traits to carry you through in each book. So you know when they're getting more intimate or he's getting sentimental, those traits start to pop out. When they draw you back in, they make you feel close to that character again. So, and you can do that stuff if you're writing family histories. I know we've heard some people talk about family histories in here. And you go, well, what does foreshadowing and series have to do with family history and all of that? But when you talk about how they first met, when they met each other, and a couple that gets married later in the book, it's you know, what happened in that first interaction that made them stay together the 50 years, you know? And how did they carry it through? I mean, on the news this week, it's been all about the Bush family and how the Bushes were so close, and the things that they did, from love at first sight to reading live love stories to each other. And they kept bringing back their family traits. Well, they talk about how that was, and they kind of foreshadow how that carried through their book, their history, and then talked about their history. So you can do it even in fiction. Doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction, but it doesn't matter. It's important just to know to carry that stuff through. Would you call the link between a series of a book almost a foreshadow? You know, the ending of one where you put that teaser. I mean, I've always called it the teaser.
Oh, the cliffhanger?
Yeah, the cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah, that's always,
carry you in. It's kind of a foreshadowing.
It's technically, well, cliffhangers are, you know, to get you to turn to the next chapter.
To
or
say
write
where's the next book.
or watch the next episode. But they do leave you in an unresolved situation,
Yes.
so you have to move forward. And a lot of foreshadowing, you know, is there going to be a fire later? Is there going to be an earthquake? Is there going to be, and again, a lot of it goes back to just the props. You know, you have in a romance, you know, they're going to take a lovely walk down a canal in France. Well, you need to kind of point out the things that are germane to your story and just leave the rest up to the reader's imagination. But if it's a mystery story where whether or not she's twirling her pearls with her right hand or her left hand is absolutely crucial to solving the crime, you know,
Yeah.
you really, again, you got to really keep up with what do you want to show them and what do you not want to show them. Tolstoy is the one that said if you show them a gun in the first chapter, you know, in the first act, shoot somebody in the second. That's the whole point of showing somebody the gun. When you watch, I'm thinking of a movie like The Hateful Eight, came out a few years ago. You know everybody in the movie is going to die, right? You know, by the title, it's a cowboy movie. It's everybody's trapped and everybody has guns. You're not shocked when somebody gets shot. I mean, you kind of knew that was going to happen at some point in here. A lot depends upon the genre. If you're writing a werewolf novel, foreshadowing is going to be, when is the full moon? Because we know that's when your book had better pick up and do something. Mm-hmm. It's a vampire novel. Are you too worried about vampires at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? No, not really, not really. Now about 11:30 at night, well, you know, it might be a little different. So, you know, the foreshadowing of clocks and time and your cliffhanger to a point.
And another thing about them is, if you put that little breadcrumb in that book, you better pay it off. So this is another time where having somebody else read it, beta readers and stuff, you put these little breadcrumbs in and you don't pay it off later. They go, why was this here? What was the purpose? You kind of drew my eye and my attention to it, but it did nothing. It went nowhere. It didn't pop up later and go, surprise! You know, it's the cliffhanger. It's got to pay off. So make sure that you have somebody read it and look for those little holes that you've left. Because if it was important enough for you to put it in there, you need to make sure you paid it off. Otherwise, you need to figure out why did you put it in there and how could you write around it. All right, let's talk about characters. So we're going to talk about characters in the series.
Questions first.
All right,
That's a lot of
you got any
stuff.
questions?
Everybody's taking notes furiously.
Seriously?
All right, well, let's talk about characters then.
So we've talked about this, I think, once or twice before too, a little bit. We've alluded to it. So when you're writing a series, you generally have some main characters that will carry through every book. Not very often in fiction are you going to find only just characters in one book and the others, unless there's something overarching time together. Sue Grafton, her tie together is an A for alibi, B for something, C for something. So it doesn't always have to have the main characters in there every time in a deal like that. But if you're carrying through a series with main characters, I always read like a lot of cozy mysteries, and I tell people, if you're setting it in a small town and somebody's the bad guy and somebody else is killed off, you've just killed off 2 of the population of the town for the next book. At some point, you run out of population. So you need to figure out a way to bring in more characters. So be careful you don't write yourself into a corner of a series that you don't have enough characters. But then there's all those little other characters. If you always go eat in a little cafe, or you always go to this bar and drink, there's got to be people in there. They don't have to be overly described, but maybe they come in a hat. Maybe it's a cowboy hat, or the lady that comes in a black veil. This is a very mysterious looking thing. It teases the reader with a character. It lets the reader put their own kind of spin on that character. How would they imagine the hat if you don't over describe it? But it also gives them a personality so that they play comfortably in the story and they don't just drop out and just drop in, and they just kind of, you want them, if they're going to pop in and out, to kind of have something, but they're not the primary characters. So you want them, you always say is have a limp, be a salty character, be a guy that might, maybe he has a foul mouth. And that's his thing, or he has a brusque voice, or somebody who always whispers. Maybe that person can't stand to talk out loud. You want that change in voice. Call those people out with a little idiosyncrasy, make them lovable. Talk about some of yours in the Malice books, maybe.
Oh boy, in our Malice books. We have some very quirky characters in our Malice books. Some are very, we have one writer who's humorous, and she's done a series in each, a story in each book, and she's over a funeral home, and her uncle and his cohorts are always getting her into trouble. And it's worked great, and it's carried over into each story, and you care about them and you want to see what they're doing. And they each have, one has, I think he's got a pacemaker, so every time he gets freaked out, he passes out. And you can always count on that to happen. And then another one doesn't speak, but he gets across what he's talking about. So, just give them each their own personality. Make somebody a hot mess. Give them a character arc that they can strive and grow with each book.
Do y'all know what we mean when we say character arc? Some people are nodding yes, some people are nodding no.
Yeah, why don't you
Okay,
explain?
a character arc is whenever you meet somebody. So you're sitting next to somebody at the table. What do you know about that person? Virtually nothing, unless you already know each other. So tonight, you know virtually nothing about each other. The next time you come, you're sitting there. This time you've seen each other, you've sat next to each other. The story arc moves a little more forward. You find out their name, maybe you chit-chat a little bit more, and the story arc now begins. The more you learn about a person. So in a novel, or even a short story, don't forget that there's always a character arc. There's an artifice we like to call the data dump. The data dump is when somebody goes, and Bob walked in the door, a graduate of MIT, 6 foot tall, 27 years old, with blue eyes, but blah, 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 blah. And they just basically kind of just throw up all of this information. Whereas you take a writer like Anne Rice, and you'll find out every one of these little tidbits, but you're going to find out over 2 or 3 chapters.
Right, spread it out, don't dump it all at once.
As these characters talk to each other or meet each other, or as the adventure unfolds, you find additional skills. There's a lot of mystery stories out there where you know very little about a character, and the character can be quite surprising. You know, the cute little quiet woman in the corner might actually be the safecracker.
Yeah.
Thinking of a couple of stories. You know, she was the last person in the room anybody would have thought was the killer, the criminal, the obvious was the big biker guy in the front who works in a tea shop and he's a barista and he just likes tattoos. You know, so welcome to character arcs. As you get to know them, you learn more about them. So that's what we mean by character arc. So it's not just the, two-dimensional cutout figure that you put in a spot. Of running gag in a lot of things where, like in any of the Mike Hammer books, every time somebody went to the newsstand, you found out some other tiny little insignificant fact about the guy that sold the newspapers. So after about 15 of these novels, he was actually the guy you started looking forward to, but you're like, oh, go buy a newspaper. Because he always had something funny to say, or there was some hitch to what was in the paper that day, or, he was always the guy that had the hint that got everybody going the right direction. So there was this constant arc throughout the whole series that this little person kept playing a part in. Well, it's kind of like, if you look at the Star Wars movies, the ultimate segue is a robot. No matter what's happening, you can always count on R2-D2 to figure out whatever it is the humans are screwing up. Suddenly the little robot goes rolling through, and the whole movie just changes direction and goes and chases the robot. That's a character arc. So you learn more and more and more about that character, no matter what it is. And a character doesn't have to be a person. It can be a structure. It can be a place.
Your setting can be a character.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's why so many murder mysteries happen in New Orleans or New York or big cities. The city never sleeps. Chicago. Chicago's a great character all by itself. It's where all the mobsters were. If I say Vegas, they give you the whole name of the whole city? No, everybody knows where Vegas is. And Vegas is a whole character all by itself, isn't it?
It has a description that comes to everybody's mind the minute you say the word. It's like talking about a haunted house. If you have a haunted house, I just read a story recently, and it has a haunted house in it. It's open for Halloween. It's done up like a haunted house, But it was kind of the behind the scenes of how it worked and the reality of how it worked. But it was a haunted house, and it had its own character, and they talked about the history of that building that it was in and why it became a haunted house. And so it took on a life of its own, and how they shaped it into the haunted house. So it was kind of cool because you could picture the rooms and how they were used and what they talked about and how it would have been a house originally, and then it was changed. And so it takes a life of its own. But those are things you also use to, these characters and these buildings and things to build your tension and your support. You might have humorous ones. Christy, you got some examples of those? How they build tension for you or something?
What builds
Tension, that your characters or like your side characters, how they can help you build tension?
Oh yeah, they can always, maybe they're a drug addict and always getting into trouble, and you're having to go to the main character's having to go to the rescue. Maybe they are constantly adopting animals that they really shouldn't be, or just the limit. There's no limit to what you can do to bring your sub characters in to play and keep the plot moving through them, or subplots.
Yeah, there could be smaller stories running underneath the main one, that pop in and out. Maybe there's some drama in their life that goes on, and it keeps derailing whoever the character is that's trying to solve the crime. It keeps like taking them off course.
Right.
and distracting them, and so they're having a hard time focusing on how to solve the case. I gotta go over here and deal with this. No, no, I gotta go over here. No, I gotta go over here. So,
Just like we have everyday distractions in our life, your characters need distractions in their lives as well.
and they can be funny. They can be the person that you look forward to, like Alan was talking about, the one character you look forward to because you know they're gonna say something funny, and it's gonna lighten up the book all of a sudden, give you a little breather from the tension before you take them back into it again. So that ebb and flow of using the characters to take the readers on an emotional roller coaster, it kind of helps keep the story from getting too heavy sometimes.
But don't be afraid to torture your main character.
Yeah. Yes. Just don't kill off your main character or even a side character. If you really think you're going to need them, you better be careful.
Well, if you write yourself into a corner, you could always kill off a secondary character.
Yeah.
Because then that changes the way the book goes. Then you've got to figure out how life goes on without that person.
Yeah, until you're writing a series, thank God I haven't finished it all, because I got to 19 and realized I killed off somebody in 16. Now I had to go back and unkill them. You know? It's like, no, I like this and I like this better. I want to unkill them here and kill them off later. So sometimes it's good to write a series and not publish it too quickly.
Writing in advance does give you an advantage because you can go back and foreshadow in another book prior to publication if there's something you come up with.
Yeah, if you're writing them one and getting it published and it's out the door and you killed somebody off, unless you can figure out a way to explain how they came back to life, maybe they're going to be a vampire, or a werewolf, or how did they come back? They're gone. You need to go find somebody else to replace them and bring in another character to do that. So if you're writing a series, you got to make those choices. When do I publish? And do I finish the series, or do I want to get on out there and start working in it? So there's two sides to that.
So when you started out writing, did you say, I'm going to write a series, or did you just start writing?
Al, why don't you answer that question first, and then I'll answer it, and then I'll let Christy answer. How did you start writing?
How did I start writing? Task, on task. I am affectionately what is known as a hack writer. Somebody goes, I need a 6,000 word story, and you need to kill the Easter Bunny. Alrighty. Easter Bunny's going down in 6,000 words. Yeah, I know you're grimacing. The really frightening thought is I was best Southern writer of the year because of that story.
Because of that story.
Literally, I killed the Easter Bunny. A story called Lake Syracuse. Yeah. If somebody tells me we need a story that we can convert to like a 30-minute TV show, we need a short story. Something horrible's in the attic. It was Memphis. I put a demonic raccoon in the top of the house. It's not unrealistic in Memphis if you've ever had one. The fact that it was demonic, everybody went, so it's a true story? It was close enough. It was close enough.
He's really good on writing to deadline. So what he's talking about is setting yourself a goal, meeting a deadline. If you're working with a publisher or anybody, even yourself, he's good at that. He can sit down and focus and write. And he's been writing, most of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What, 7?
I wasn't going to give him the ages.
I sold my first story in 1968.
So,
Y'all try to figure out that math. It means I'm a lot older than you.
wait, let me get the calculator. No. However, I did not plan to be a writer. Wasn't part of my life. Busy mom, full-time job, couple kids, a husband. I know the Cozy Mysteries. A friend made me read Twilight. Then I read some Sookie books and the Sazi book, and I couldn't get something out of my mind. Every morning, I'd be laying in the bed trying to wake up, and this little scene would play over and over, and every night the same thing. It was a character from the 3rd series I had read. And I thought, if I just write this down, send it to this author, I don't care if they ever use it in a story, but I need sleep. Because it had been going on for 2 weeks. I was done. And I started writing it down, and I just grabbed a spiral notebook, started writing it. When I finished the 2nd spiral notebook, I decided to get a laptop. And 5.5 years later, I finished a 15-novel series. And so, again, it was all about, I couldn't get it to shut up, and I just kept writing. And when I got to the end, I went, woohoo, done! And then my daughter goes, no, you're not. We know you. Yeah, I didn't last. I wrote a few short stories, and then started a series off of it. So currently working on book 19 while I try to promote and publish. So that's more difficult. It's actually more difficult. It's easy to write and write very quickly. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's easy when you're writing really, really fast because the story stays coherent. Because you don't have to slide, like you talked about earlier, you don't have to stop and go, now where was I again? Every time you sit down, you're just continuing, and it's going fast, fast, fast. Writing the takeoff, much more difficult. It's not as cohesive and not as easy for me. It doesn't come as fast. And I have to go back and think, okay, what was it I was doing? So it's not as easy. And also when you're promoting, you're doing out there, you're doing your job, your house, your life, everything, and then you're trying to promote. You have less time for your writing. So you have to make those choices when you're ready. What about you? How'd you get started?
Mine started with a short story. I just had this vision in my head, and I needed it, like Patty needed to get it out of my head. And it was a 5,000-word short story, and the character was like, we're not done. So then it turned into this, and then from there it went on, and I'm working on book 4 now. And like I said, writing in advance helps because I have gone back and changed some things to make it work out in other books. And when I wrote the short story, I finally got the nerve to show it to my sister, who is an editor of nonfiction business books. And she's like, this is really good, you need to find a writer's group. And then that's how I ended up with Malice in Memphis. And that's all she wrote.
And when you're writing, you have to decide kind of what you're writing and why you're writing. I know we have some people here who are writing to document family history, or they want to motivate, I've heard people talk about they want to motivate their family or their kids, or leave back a legacy for their kids. It's what is your motivation? And if you're writing about family histories and what your grandparents' life was like, those types of things have a very narrow window. And you don't, and I know it doesn't sound like it, but you do. You have a very narrow window because every day those people age. You never know when you're going to lose them. So you need to get as much information as you can gather and gather it quickly and kind of get it formatted because they may not be there to finish the story tomorrow. And you may miss 20 years worth of information because they didn't get a chance to tell you what happened during that period. So you can't put it off. You have to get going on those types of books. You have to do them quickly. So some things force their deadline on you. You don't have the choices. Just let it go, though. Have a good time with it. I think the best thing was with me is when I was writing it, I would like call my best friend and go, okay, we need this person to be an animal. What animal do you want to have this week? What do you want to be? And we had more fun. Or I need a name, and he needs to sound really cute, Or I need a name that sounds really mean. And we brainstorm and come up with things, or the history behind some of my characters' names and why they were picked. They're just pretty funny, and they're all about my personal life, and it was fun. We've actually had a good time doing it together. So sometimes when you're writing, it's good to bring in somebody else, especially writing about family history. Maybe you get a couple of people in the family to help, and they go document different parts, and you all get back together, and you kind of do it as a family project. It can be fun. If you're researching the Civil War, we have a book here. Let me pull it out here. Shelley Foote's a famous writer, and this is all about the Civil War. Well, there's all those people to interview if you want to talk about them. You got to go get them. You got to go find, and you got to get people looking through their stuff and find old pictures and, tell you stories and letters and pull out old letters and things. Have a Civil War diary. Getting those because it's like translating. Sorry, but they write really tiny and in old copper plate script. It's just hard to read, and it's really tiny and it's really faded. Getting people to read those things and help you figure out what they were talking about, and then how do you weave them in your books. Well, sometimes you might need a lot of people helping you do the research or whatever. But again, the windows get harder and harder if you're doing historically based stuff. So don't get complacent. If you really want to do that stuff, you really got to get on it. But these are all series. This is a series, so and by the way, you can check these out in the library. People do, and they're very popular. We got a couple other series, we'll just bring them up now. So, we've all been laughing about this one. The Foxfire Book. This is a series, and it's 15 books. I'm going to read you what it says on the front. Hog dressing, log cabin building, mountain crafts, and foods. Planting by the Signs, Snake Lore, Hunting Tales, Faith Healing, Moonshining, and Other Affairs of Plain Living. And one of the very first chapters, I just had to crack up laughing, I just loved it. In the contents, the table of contents, it starts out, this is the way I was raised up. Tells you everything about the book, and it's on the table of contents page. But it's a series, all about practical life. So, again, the series can be anything. It doesn't have to be nonfiction. It can be fiction, nonfiction, mystery, comedy, humor. I mean, we enjoy them because people once again, especially I like series because once they start reading, they like to read. This one's a little different take on it. The series is called Genetics, but it's a science series. So each book has a different topic. So again, another way to have a series, but it's not like you have to carry over a character or something, but it has a theme that carries it through, science. So the series can be all kinds of things. You have to figure out what it is your series is about. Not every book lends itself to a series. You might be happy when they rode off into the sunset and it was over. And one book. Okay, go write a different book. Different characters. It's up to you.
Kind of up to the characters sometimes too.
Well, yeah, in my world it was the characters. Yeah, they just don't seem to shut up. And I know people don't understand. People who are not writers will tell you, they'll look at you funny and they'll go, what do you mean your characters talk to you? That's just stupid. It's when you can try to go to bed at night and your mind starts playing out scenes. And you have to get that written down because the next morning it's going to be playing a different one out. And it just keeps going. And you're like, I'm done. No. You got to write. And you don't really actively plan out what they're doing. It just starts happening. And it's kind of like watching a movie. They've got you. You're kind of, you're done. You're obsessed.
Yeah,
yes, it is. It is.
You're at their mercy. They'll lead you where they want to take you.
And my daughter would tell you really quickly, people laugh, and I always laughed at it before until I tried to go 3 days without writing. And by the third day, I was shaking so hard. She's like, would you please sit down? Nobody wants to deal with you until you write something. So, when you're sucked in by your characters, or like the other night, I was really tired and I've been traveling, and I didn't feel like writing. And I flipped over my laptop and I started reading back some of the short stories I'd written. I was going, oh, I like this. And I got sucked back in. And I'm like, I wrote it. 4 years ago, I wrote it. I'm sucked back in. I had to stay up late and finish the story. I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to pay tomorrow. But again, when you can go back and read something you wrote a couple years ago and you're sucked back in, how many readers want to read that? A lot. A lot. Get it finished. I know we're kind of running close on time, so let's just talk about killing your beloved characters or not.
It's a great way.
The move hard, she's shaking her head going, no.
No, I'm all for it. Sometimes
That's
you
why
just
I'm laughing. I'm going, you're talking to the blood queen over there.
Yeah, there's going to be some in my book that I've heard people tell me that they love them and they're going to die. They're going to die hard. But it'll, how those reactions, it creates another plot. How are they going to go on without them? It's going to change everything. You got to give those conflicts to your characters to keep them moving.
Or you got to find a way that they keep coming back to life, which I did. Can't kill her off in most ways.
You stake them down hard enough, they'll stay dead.
Well, she's not.
Yeah,
You can't keep her down yet, so she's working on it.
Think how your character would react to certain things and then set it into play.
Any hints from you?
Oh, you got to do it. You got to do it. All right, killing your darlings is not just also killing your characters. It's also be willing to edit, sacrifice a chapter, sacrifice a scene.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times when we sit down to write, especially when you start getting into a series, a lot of writers. I had a conversation this afternoon with a potential writer, and the conversation was about everything but writing. Well, how do you find a publisher? How do you get an editor? Are you done yet? I just kept going back to, are you done yet? No, I'm on chapter 2, but I'm worried about it. I was like, you ain't got nothing to worry about. You ain't got nothing yet.
Yeah, until
When you
until
write
the
the end,
there's nothing
you have
can do.
no worries. till you think you're done. Because when you write the end, that's when Miss Patty's alluded, as she foreshadowed earlier. Writing the book's the easy part. Going back and editing it again and again and again and changing it, and then suddenly realizing, God, I hate the way the character does that. That is so obnoxious. And now you're going to rewrite. And then, or now suddenly the series has started taking place in your head. But I can't have a series because I killed off the dog. I need the dog. So then you got to go back and you got to not kill the dog, and you got to, yeah, so when we say be prepared to kill your darlings, the other thing about killing your darlings a lot of times is when you get it back from a beta reader and they don't get it. So you stayed up late at night coming up with this great idea, and your beta readers come back and they go, I don't know what you mean. You know, you can't look at your beta readers and go, oh, come on, you idiots. Everybody knows that means. No, it doesn't. My favorite example of that in the movies was Guardians of the Galaxy, when he's trying to explain to all the intergalactic people things we know on Earth. You know, my favorite question was, why do I want to draw my finger across his throat? Because, you know, then you can, everybody's confused. Nobody had any idea that meant now you can kill him. It was hilarious. I'm sorry, that happened as an editor. That happens so many times because maybe something means something very specifically to you, and maybe to your family or immediate friends. Maybe it's an inside joke.
Yeah.
But nobody else gets it. And to you, it's obvious. It's like, of course everybody knows that means that we're going to be there on Tuesday. Nobody has any idea. They even picked on it in Harry Potter, where when Harry and Weasley were mad at each other, and Weasley tried to send him this very convoluted message, and then they're talking about it later, and Harry just goes, nobody could have got that. That's mental.
Yes.
Occasionally, that's what you get back from your reviewer. Like, nobody, I have no idea what you're doing on these 2 or 3 pages.
I had a character.
And sometimes you gotta, and it's, sometimes you take it a little personal.
Yes.
Because this might have been the chapter you really worked the hardest on, and your audience just isn't getting it. Well, you didn't get it across to the audience. So be prepared to have to go back and kill some of your darlings.
But just because you cut it from that book or that chapter doesn't
don't
mean you
delete it.
get rid of it.
Okay.
Put it somewhere in a file and save it, because it might come back into play later.
When I started 16, my takeoff, I started writing it, what I thought everybody wanted, you know, wedding, kids, you know, where it was going to take the story. And I got 50,000 words in it and went, this is way too complicated. I'm not ready to write this complicated. So I stripped out 45,000 words and started over. It's sitting in another Word document. It's just sitting there, kind of waiting for me to decide to use it. But I stripped it out. 45,000 words, set it aside, and started again. Everybody's like, oh my God, that's 45,000 words. I'm like, so? It's not like I had a deadline. I was writing for me. At that point, it's book 16. Didn't know if I was going to make another series off of it or not. Who cared? It's just 45,000 words. Set it aside. It might pop back up at some point. Maybe it'll pop up in the end of the series again, you know? I'll take some of it out, but never throw it away. Sometimes I throw them at the bottom of a document. Maybe it's a scene that just doesn't feel right in that story. I'm not sure what to do with it, so sometimes I'll keep sticking it at the bottom, kind of highlight it, yelling, and let it sit down there. And later on, you're writing, you go, oh, wait, there's that bit, and you bring it back up. And it works right into the story.
That's also a great way of getting your great killer opening line. I tell everybody, don't worry about it. It's like, oh, I just can't get this chapter started. I can't get the, yeah, you can. Just pick a spot and start.
Right.
Just start typing. Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Bob was walking down the street on a bad day. There you go. Just start writing. Just start typing. And as you type, as your mind gets into the story and you really start getting the flow going, you will come up with some cool stuff. You'll be typing along, and you'll actually be like smiling at yourself going, all right,
Yes,
that's
we
good,
are.
that's good, that's good. And you'll hit stuff that you can kind of go back and go, oh, you know, if I rearrange these chapters, man, this would make a great chapter 1. So don't be so hung up in your writing. I was telling you, you can't really be a grown-up and be a writer for so many obvious reasons. The most important of which is grown-ups have to be done. Y'all know what I mean? You know, you kind of like doing the dishes. You start here, you do this, you follow this procedure, and you're done. In writing, you're kind of the creator of your own world. You don't have to follow your own rules. So you can just kind of start writing and then kind of go back and have your dessert first. Go back and get a cookie. Go back and, you know, move things around. Once you're done writing the story out, have somebody that is not related to you read it to you. Oh, that is so hard. It is so hard to sit there and listen to that. Because
You will flinch.
yeah, there's a lot of, oh, God, that's terrible. And you just mark up your copy, because every place that they butcher your work, you need to go back and edit. And that goes for every single genre of any type. Whether you're writing business, you're writing for pleasure, you're writing for research, you're writing genre, you're writing for publication, have somebody read it back to you. It is shocking. And have more than one person do it. Have somebody totally
And have 'em
different
be
from them.
Different, yeah, very different personalities.
Have a very different personality read it to you, because it can be really different.
And stand in the front of the mirror and read it to yourself.
Have a little computer read it to you. That's funny too. It's a little like bringing Stephen Hawking's back and have him read your story to you.
Yes.
But if you're reading out loud and you stumble, then you know, oh, okay, I need to rework that sentence, because if I can't read it to myself, how is my reader going to read it?
So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of information here. Any questions so far? I see a lot of notes going, a lot of people left. Cards, questions, comments, conspiracy theories. Oh yeah. Okay, what's next?
Well, then let's just kind of close it out with, what would you say is the best tip you have in writing a series?
Best tip. Keeping track. I'm an accounting manager by day, so Excel is my life. I keep track of all of my characters, their descriptions, their flaws. I keep track of them in an Excel spreadsheet. I keep a tab for each book, so I can keep track of where I went in that book, major points in each chapter. You need to find a way to organize and keep up, and so you can go back and what color were his eyes when you're 5 books in. You might not remember, so you need to be able to have that handy so you can go and find it.
How about you?
Best tip for writing a series? Type.
Faster. Let's see what
Type.
he tells you 2 things. Type faster.
My favorite thing I love to hear from writers, and I hear this constantly. Oh, everything I'm typing is garbage. It's all terrible. Oh my God, have you seen the New York Times bestsellers list lately? Type faster. Really. Writers are not allowed to judge your own work. Big hint. And that goes for any and every genre you're working on. I don't care if you're writing the exposition on Stamps for Dummies. You are not allowed to be the critic of your work. Plain and simple. You are not your target audience. So I guess the second biggest hint would remember who you're writing to.
Who is your
And that
audience?
reading is a personal experience. 100 people do not get together and read your book together. Reading is a one-on-one adventure. It's from you, the writer, to them, the reader. Now, you hope to have 100,000 friends,
Yes.
because you want to sell that many books. But the reading experience, always keep in mind, it's very personal. I tell you, this is a very intimate experience. You're letting somebody else come and play and experience your world. And the better the writer you are, the more people want to come play in your playground. So that's, ooh, nice beep. That would be the big advice I got.
I'd say my advice is enjoy it. If you're writing a series, it means you're having fun. If it stops having fun, you need to put it in the drawer for a bit and then come back to it. Read it again, get hooked back, start writing again. But enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, then you won't make it cohesive. You won't want to finish the story. It'll sit with 10 chapters and never be done. So whatever you write, just make sure you're enjoying it. It doesn't matter if it's about science and you really geek out on science, then geek out. Somebody else is going to geek out with you, but enjoy it. As long as you're happy, that's what writing's all about. And then always read. Don't ever stop reading. Buy books, read books, all kinds of books, because as you read, you pick up tips on how to write. Whether you do it consciously or subconsciously, you learn about it. So if you're writing a series, read other series. Maybe they're not even in the same genre, but they'll teach you on how to, you'll get the flow of how they bring their characters through, or how they introduce those sub-characters, or how do they keep from killing off everybody in the small town so they can still have a small town left. You know, you need to do it.
Murder, She Wrote?
Murder, She Wrote, yeah. Good Lord, they had to have tourists.
They killed everybody in that town
Yeah, well,
twice.
thank God for tourists. They always cause trouble. But you have to do that. You have to have fun. Writing is as much about reading, and it's all about having fun. Enjoy it. It's a personal experience, like Alan said, and enjoy it. And I'm going to give a shameless plug for the library. Germantown Library's been great. They're letting us host us every month here, and they're great suppliers for we send them the emails and go, hey, we need books on this, and they'll go find me books, and we love them. Promote. Tell people to read. Tell people to go to the library, check it out. They don't have money, go to the library. Check it out. Read it. Enjoy it. But also go write reviews. Get online. Write reviews for those authors. Tell them how you like their book. Tell them what you love about their character or why you love to hate that character. You know, everybody kind of was hating Snape, and then they kind of, well, maybe I kind of like him. He's kind of quirky at the end. So tell them why you like it. Review the books, because book reviews are how one, other people discover those books, and two, how authors get promotions in order to get their books sold. So help an author, enjoy your libraries, and please come again. We enjoy doing this. We have a good time doing it. You can see we kind of geek out on the table. These are books from, these are all books from the Dark Oak Press site from various authors. We enjoy it. We're having a good time with it. And we're enjoying life just through books. Enjoy. Thank you.